Hello, my name is Dr. Peter Toivonen. I am with Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada at the Pacific Agri-Food Research Centre in Summerland, British Columbia. Today I'd like to speak to you about getting from field to the packer, post-harvest methods to ensure fruit quality for blueberries. Quality at the packing house depends on several things, and these are probably the four major issues to consider. Having good production practices to optimize the quality of the fruit. There's nothing that can be done to improve fruit quality once it's been harvested from the bush. Therefore, it depends on everything that's happened before. Second thing is we have to implement good harvest practices to minimize handling injury to the fruit. We don't want to cause bruising and damage to the fruit while we're trying to move it into the packing house. Prevention of solarization is a very big issue because exposure to the sun causes heating and water loss in the fruit, and therefore we need to do as much as we can to avoid that until it is arrived at the packing house. And we also have to rapidly transit the fruit to the packing house after it's been harvested. Where possible, we should start developing ideas as to which lots or fields have better shipping potential and focus on using those fields for harvesting fruit that's meant to be distance shipped or stored for a period of time before marketing. Blueberry country is very similar to the Okanag. During the harvest season, the weather's hot and dry. Even though the lower mainland is a very wet and rainy area, blueberry harvest season is a very hot and dry period of time. Implications of this are that we have much higher respirations in the fruit at the time of harvest because it's so warm and out in the field. Compared to apples, blueberries have a much higher respiration rate at the time of harvest. You can see in blueberries, respiration rates in excess of 100 milligrams of CO2 per kilogram per hour, whereas an apple, when we harvest those apples, they're somewhere between 15 and 20 milligrams of CO2 per kilogram per hour. So there's a lot of turnaround in the metabolism of blueberries. Consequence is when the fruit are warm like that, they will be using up sugars and acids in the fruit, which means there'll be more rapid decline in quality. In fact, because of this differential, blueberries have a very short storage and shipping potential compared to apple. At harvest, the best we can do is to have strategies to buy time. We know as soon as the fruit comes off the bush, there will be a decline in quality. That's just inevitable. But we can do things to buy ourselves some time in terms of getting that fruit cooled. First thing we need to do is make sure we implement a good logistics plan well before harvest. It's no good to try to develop a logistics plan as you are harvesting because you don't have time to think about what you should be doing. You should be ensuring that the first off the bush is first into the packing house, and with no exceptions whatsoever. The second thing we have to do is deal with the solarization. The most effective and practical approach is to use reflective tarps. This has been very successful in sweet cherry industry in British Columbia over the last decade in terms of getting excellent quality fruit out into the export markets. This is what reflective tarps look like. You see the bottom two panels. Reflective tarp is constructed with 3 layers. One, there's a core of a polyethylene woven tarp in the middle. The inside or the bottom side layered with a silvered mylar. A top layer is a titanium white color. And it's a very deliberate kind of design. This comes from NASA, in fact. This is part of their strategy for temperature management out in space. But what happens is the white outside is actually very effective reflectance for heat, infrared, sun heat. coming down on the fruit is most effectively reflected by white, not by the silver. The silver itself will actually absorb heat from the fruit, from the underside. So once the tarp is sitting on the fruit, the silver layer will absorb that heat, transfer it out through the tarp, and the white layer on the outside will actually emit some of that heat. So fruit will not heat up under that tarp. Quite often, the fruit will cool slightly. I've had experiments where we've had the temperature of the fruit come down almost a full degree over about an 8-hour period when it's under this tarp. You need to cover up your harvest containers with the fruit as soon as you can after it's been harvested to protect it from solarization. This material has been used in the forestry industry for several decades now, and it's produced by a company in Canada called Bush Pro, and they're in Armstrong, BC. And they will fabricate this material to your requirements. In the cherry industry, what's happened is we have these half bins that are used to take the pails of cherries, and we cover that with an insert with this reflective tarp, and the insert is attached by a Velcro or some similar manner to the half bins, and the tarp stays on the fruit until it's delivered to the cooling shed. It's also extremely inexpensive approach to doing this. What are the benefits of using the reflective tarps? Well, first of all, we can see overall visual quality is maintained by the use of this tarp at the time of harvest. At the time of harvest, if we use this and then take the fruit to cool it and put it in storage, it maintains the overall visual quality unchanged for a period of time. In storage, this is 1 degree storage, which is not quite ideal, but nonetheless, it gives us an example of how this might work. And then when we put the fruit into shelf conditions, this is 13 degrees for a few days, we can see that there's a decline in visual quality, which is expected because it's warmer. When we don't use the tarp, we can see there's a significant decline to the threshold of acceptability at the end of harvest and below acceptability after it's been on the shelf for 2 days. So, but just by using a tarp, we can bring the fruit or ensure the fruit is acceptable at the marketplace on a visual scale. Percent of fruit that are shriveled, visually shriveled, we can see that when you don't protect it with a tarp, that's the red line, that we have over 20% of the fruit by the time it goes on the shelf that are unacceptable in terms of being too many of them shriveled. Whereas if we use the tarp, we can reduce that to 1/3 or less of the fruit that are being affected by the shrivel. Overripe berries, when we harvest blueberries and put them in storage or ship them, they do continue to mature or ripen. And we can see that when we don't protect the fruit, they, on a linear basis, they continue to turn more and more ripe with time. If we use the tarp, we can reduce that quite significantly to about 1/3 of what we see with the unprotected fruit at the time of harvest, and that benefit is retained in shelf conditions as well. So it's got a huge overall effect on what the fruit will look like in the marketplace. In terms of decay, the same thing. We use the tarp, we reduce decay. There's almost no increase in decay over time in storage. We see it increase after we put the fruit into shelf conditions, which is not unexpected. However, if we don't use a tarp to protect the fruit at the time of harvest, we see a doubling of the disease and even greater rise in the decay, rate of decay in the shelf conditions. How do we view whether we should be using this tarp? Is there a benefit? I think there's a dollar and cents benefit to the use of tarps. One of the big things I think about is the insurance value of the tarp. Like, how can you look at marketing your fruit? If you don't use the tarp, you have to get the fruit to the market as quickly as possible so that you get it sold to the retailer so that it has some legs to it for a few days before shriveling becomes apparent. If you use the tarp, all of a sudden you buy yourself several days or a week before you have to sell it to retailers. So that gives you another several days to a week of breathing room to get those fruit marketed. In other words, they don't necessarily have to be out your door the day you harvest and cool the fruit. You can give yourself a bit of flexibility and perhaps and improve your marketing capability and with higher prices if you don't have to sell it that day. If you don't use reflective tarp, as I stated, problems with quality outcomes are there. If you use the tarp, you can buy yourself some time and give yourself some flexibility for marketing. Why do we have apparently no visual quality problems at the time of harvest or at the time of packing, whereas you have complaints in the retail marketplace? Well, if we take a look at berries in a flat here, we can see I put a little clock face on several of these fruit just to indicate that some of them have not yet spent their potential storage or shelf life, like this fruit here, still at 12 o'clock noon. And however, a fruit here that's already at 1:45. This fruit has only got 1/4 of its life left. This fruit has about half of its life left. We don't know which fruit has what kind of life. It's difficult to predict or measure which fruit has a good potential shipping life or storage life, and there's no instrumentation we can put in a packing line to identify that. So what we need to do is ensure whatever we're doing in the harvest and packing that we minimize the quality changes so that even though we have variability of potential, that we maximize that potential for all the fruit. And of course, the weakest fruit will be the ones that will be giving you the problems in the marketplace. Effect of delays to cooling. Well, we looked at several scenarios, and this comes partly from our work with cherries and also discussions we had with the blueberry industry about a decade ago. And these are probably three most likely scenarios that could occur. 1 hour delay before cooling after harvest, 4 hours delay cooling after harvest, 8 hours delay in cooling after harvest. And so what were the implications of these delays in cooling? Well, we're looking at bloom rating and the waxy bloom covering on the fruit, which is an indicator of freshness. As blueberries age, the bloom declines and the fruit has no longer got the pale, powdery complexion to it. It's got a darker blue, shiny appearance to it. And in storage, if we have 1 hour delay in cooling, we have good waxy bloom retention. Even under shelf conditions, we maintain a good waxy bloom on that fruit. With 4 hours delay, we have some slightly less bloom, and again, after shelf, it's even lower as well. However, when we go to 8 hours delay in bloom, we see that there's a significant, very large drop in bloom rating by the time we come to the end of storage. That's before we put it on a shelf. This would be, considered unacceptable already by the time it comes out of cooling or the cold room. So this fruit would not be acceptable in the marketplace in terms of freshness, appearance. Percentage of fruit that are unacceptably soft. Soft fruit is a big alarm bell in terms of quality for buyers, and there are claims quite often for fruit being too soft in the marketplace. And with a 1 hour delay, we may minimize the development of softening in the fruit, shown by this bottom blue line. If we have a 4 hour delay, we have much more consistent increase in softening, and even more so if we have 8 hours delay. So if you want to have least amount of fruit that are displaying softness in the pack, you need to cool as quickly as possible, and to avoid claims and downgrading of the value of the crop at the marketplace. Anthracnose, this common disease that occurs in some years with the blueberries. Again, development of that disease in storage under shelf conditions is minimized by the 1 hour delay in cooling. That increases somewhat with the 4 hour delay and dramatically with the 8 hours delay. So every hour delay leads to greater amounts of the anthracnose showing up in the fruit in the marketplace. Looking at this visually, this is what we see here from that experiment. We can see as we go along, we have less and even less bloom. The fruit are starting to look dark blue in color, so not looking fresh at all anymore when we have those delays in cooling. When we look at culls, or percentage of culls in the fruit, we can see when we go for 1 hour delay, this is the decayed fruit. On these three areas here, we can see the decay increases quite a bit with the big delays and cooling, and this is showing soft fruit. You can see again there's exponential increase in number of soft fruit with the delays in cooling. So this is what the buyers look at when they and the consumers will evaluate. Well, I threw away half my berries because we had that delay in cooling. I'm not going to buy those fruit anymore. Bruising is the second biggest problem for quality in the marketplace after soft fruit. Visually, there may be no problem at the packing house. They said that before, and it becomes apparent after some time, and most often this is at the buyer consumer, so you wouldn't be able to identify that at the time the fruit is being packed at all. This is the insidious part of this bruising injury. We've done work to assess bruising and drop heights in blueberry and cherries, and this can be done in blueberries as well, and we'll probably see similar results. One of the things we've evaluated with the cherries was different picking containers have different potentials for causing bruising. We had three containers. We looked at a plastic kidney bucket, a metal pail, and a soft corrugated plastic container. And as we can see, these are three different varieties of cherries. You can see with time that the metal pail and the kidney bucket showed increased levels of bruising with increased drop height. That did not happen with the corrugated plastic container. There was no increase in bruising with drop height because this container absorbs the shock of the fruit hitting the surface from a drop. We can also see from this lapins had the least amount of bruising from similar drop heights as compared with sweetheart, which had the most amount of bruising, and blush, which had an intermediate level of bruising. This same will be true for blueberry varieties. Different varieties will have different susceptibilities to bruising, and that needs to be understood. You need to design a harvest and transfer system where you minimize the amount of drop injuries you can have from the time of picking the fruit to the time of delivery to the packing house. This is probably one of the most common stages where we get bruising in fruit. It's dropping from the picking container into a receiving container in the field. And every time you have a transfer, you have bruising development because the fruit hits the hard surface. In this case as well. It depends on how high you are off the surface as to how much bruising occurs, but every time there's a transfer, there is some bruising occurring. I can't repeat that enough times. We transfer leads to new bruising, so minimize the number of transfers. That's one thing you can do. Impact bruising increases when temperature are cooler. So the packing line can be an area of prime concern if it's not designed properly, but nonetheless in the field you get bruising if you have high enough drop height, and that does happen fairly regularly. Impact bruising can be reduced if picking containers or flats, totes are designed to be soft, and this is an area that probably should be examined more in the sweet cherry industry. There's been significant improvements made by looking at least picking containers being soft. Something I haven't talked about a lot is compression bruising, and this is actually more of a problem in the field because it increases when temperatures are warmer. So in the field, during transport to the packing house is where compression bruising can be a real problem. Compression bruising effects are very much more delayed than even impact bruising, and quite often show up as soft berries. And so when you have soft berries in the marketplace, it's likely compression bruising that was the cause for that. Production factors that can affect bruising. This is work that derived from cherries, but a lot of it would be applicable to blueberries. Canopy management is very important. Cherries from shaded canopies are much more susceptible to bruising. And so you need to manage your canopy so there's good light penetration into where the fruit are in the bush. Excessive nitrogen application in relation to calcium affects susceptibility. More nitrogen there is, the softer the fruit are, and the more susceptible they are to bruising injury. When you have heavy crops, you can get bruising because of mechanical injury on the tree with the wind blowing, that sort of thing. And also, when you have multiple picks, as you do in blueberries, there are greater picking-related injuries. Previous harvest can influence the quality of subsequent harvest from that same bush. As we showed a little bit, as we'll show in a second, harvest maturity also affects susceptibility. And as showed previously, some varieties are more susceptible to bruising than others. This is showing us the effect of canopy management on fruit firmness at harvest, and this is cherries, but the same thing would occur in blueberries. With control, which is not summer pruned, we have lots of shading, and this is a very shaded orchard. We can see the fruit are quite a bit softer, and the margins of acceptable softness and sweet cherries, whereas fruit that were from an open canopy summer pruning, we can see the fruit are all exceeding the minimum standard, which is 300 for sweet cherry firmness. Therefore, these would also be more resilient against effects of bruising. You can see that as an example here in terms of canopy management. Good canopy management, we have evaluating percent of fruit, soft fruit, and this is two different harvest seasons. We can see that if we have good canopy management, we never have a problem with soft fruit, even if we have more advanced maturity. So the bruising really isn't a problem. When we have poor canopy management, all of a sudden we see that there's a lot more problems that can occur with more advanced maturity. So it's an interaction between maturity and canopy management. So canopy management can get you out of problems. So it's an interesting way to look at things in terms of can I make the fruit more resilient against bruising. Compression injury can occur during picking and transport to the packing house, and this is from a cherry orchard where there was a heavily rutted lane leading from the orchard going to the tarmac and then to the packing house. We can see when fruit were harvested off tree, there was no problems with soft fruit, whereas fruit that went through the normal harvest and transport to the packing house, there were significant problems in that fruit in the first few weeks in cold storage. And one factor is that cherries will firm up over time in cold storage. As blueberries will also do the same. So the fruit here, if they, the fruit in this case here, if they were going to very near markets very soon after harvest, we would have quality problems with softness with those fruits. So it's not just where what happens in fruit going to distance markets or after storage. Sometimes we can have more problems if we have a lot of compression injury. You can have more problems with soft fruit in the near markets as well. So something to think about. How to avoid compression injury? That's probably an important question. Do not have containers packed too high with fruit. Keep the depth of the fruit 12 inches or lower. Ensure that pickers do not excessively squeeze the fruit during harvest. In other words, train your pickers to be as gentle with the fruit as they can. If the laneway in the field is rough and has ruts, fill in the ruts, make the laneway smooth. Every bump causes the fruit to bump up and down. That leads to a significant amount of compression bruising, especially for those fruit that are on the bottom end, the bottom layer of that container. Use rigid containers that do not easily get deformed when handling the fruits. When you're picking up your harvest flat, if it's susceptible to being deformed, if you handle it roughly, then those kind of containers will lead to a lot of bruising in the fruit. I don't think the blueberry industry has too many problems with the divided flats that they use, but it's just something to consider. Fruit from second and third picks may have suffered compression injury from prior harvests, therefore you get softer fruit. Again, picker training can help to minimize that problem with the first harvest. And in fact, it's anecdotal information in the industry that if you're going to ship fruit distance markets or store them, that you only use the first harvest fruit, and that's because of the injury that's caused by the previous harvest on that fruit, and that fruit will be soft because of it. And here's an example of that from Argentina. We have two different harvests of fruit in two different years. This is first year, second year. And the green represents the fruit from the first harvest, and the orange, red line represents the fruit from the second harvest, and the dashed lines with the same colors represent the second harvest. Yeah, sorry. Solid lines represent the harvest from different orchards or fields, and the dashed line represents the second harvest from those fields. And so we can see a shift in firmness being softer with the second harvest. It's not so bad in the first year. However, in the second year, we can see that the second harvests are far more soft than the first harvest. So we have to be careful to understand if we're going to have multiple harvests from uh, a field that the second harvest might be significantly lower in quality because of the way we've handled the fruit in the first harvest. Take-home messages. Protect blueberries from the sun and low humidity after picking. Reflective tarps are an answer to this, and it's very simple and relatively inexpensive. And the company that produces them can fabricate them to whatever specifications that you would like. And it's local, it's here in British Columbia. Reduce the need for transfers of fruit as much as possible. The fewer transfers, the better. And be gentle during picking and transfer as much as possible. Drop the fruit the least you can. Try to be as kid glove with the fruit as you can. Do not squeeze blueberries. Try to teach pickers to harvest them so that they're not manhandling the fruit as they do so. And get the fruit to the packing shed as soon as possible. Thank you.